All right, I'm gonna show you how to set up a Hennessy hammock. This would apply to pretty much any of his hammocks. I've owned Hennessy hammocks for over 10 years. I've purchased 9 different models, given some away as gifts. And so I also know that his original videos are pretty old and the granularity is pretty high, so maybe this will be helpful for someone. And this is hopefully goes beyond just a basic setup. I'm gonna show you what I've learned and tricks and problems that you run into that you need to look out for. So the first thing you need to do is select your site. He recommends something like 15 to 20 feet apart. And for those who don't take a ruler with them, you know, something like whatever your wingspan is, that's the same as your height. So I'm 6 foot, so this is about 6. And then this is something like 12 feet. Now you can get away with narrower tree distances, but you run into some problems. And you can get away with longer ones, but you run into some problems, so I'll try and point out to you what some of those are. He gives you different length straps you can choose, and since we have a bunch of models, I have a 2-inch shorter one, and I have a 1-inch long one, and I also sometimes set up the hammock without any straps at all. There's reasons for that, sometimes to save weight on a long backpacking trip, but also because sometimes the straps get in your way, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So we'll start with this one here. As you take it around the tree, you can do one of two things. You can put the strap through itself, which then typically makes the whole system a little bit longer, which you might want to do if the distance between trees is really far and you want that extra length, or you can just do it like this, where you go up the one and down the other. So it kind of depends. The one advantage of going through like this is that then it doesn't fall off the tree while you go to the other side. So we'll just do it like that for now. And this first part is a little bit experimentation to figure out what your distance is going to be. So if you come over here, I'll show you on this tree. So this is a good example. I have way too much webbing for what I want to do here. And since my trees are kind of just barely the right distance, I don't want to get stuck with a bunch of extra webbing shortening my distance, because I need my rope to go a certain distance so that I can hook my canopy to it. So what I might do at this point is I might actually change my mind and come back over here and use this to take up that extra space in the webbing. That way I don't have all this excess webbing in the system. And then I'll take him and go around over here. Now he's not going to reach, but he'll get close enough. Okay, so that's the plan on the webbing. Now if it's raining, you can start with the rain fly and you can put that over your head and you can work dry, but at the moment it's not raining. So this is the backpacker model, and I'm not going to worry too much about keeping it off the floor. You may be familiar with his snake skins. They are super cool. I think it's a great invention. I have learned not to carry them because I don't know beforehand if I want the rain fly and the hammock connected inside the snake skin, and so I kind of get trapped to however I put it away, and it also just adds weight. And so as a backpacker, I stopped taking the snake skins, I stopped taking the bag, I cut the cord shorter, I don't take the webbing. There's a bunch of things that I don't do. Okay, so first things first, when you have it in your hand, you have to decide which way you want to get in and out of the hammock. So if there's a beautiful view here, you probably want to get in and out. And you'll see that by, if you hold the hammock up like this, the mesh up, you can see that the zipper's going this way. So if I set it up this way, I'm going to always be getting in and out of the hammock over there. I've made this mistake many, many times. And on a different hammock, I actually marked with some Sharpie the end here so that I knew we normally do red for head. So I marked it with red Sharpie. I think I cut it off later, but that told me this is the head end. And then I always kind of, I always sleep with my head on the one side, not the other. That's a choice. And so I always kind of knew which way I was looking, but I've set it up wrong, and then you're basically exiting onto a cliff all the time. It's really annoying. So for the sake of this video, I'll do it this way because of where the sun is. So how you keep all these cords managed is also an option. Normally I tidy them up like this. I just took this hammock down 5 minutes ago from my sun's spot to show you. So basically what you want to do is you want to go in a configuration like this. You want to go up the strap or down, doesn't matter. But if you go up, then over here you go down. And if you went down, then over here you go up. Okay, now you're not gonna be able to tie this yet because you don't really know how much slack you need on this side of the hammock and that side of the hammock. So I would tie a quick Siberian hitch. I have another video about that, just to get a quick knot in place so that I can go over here and see where we're at. So now I come over here. Now I could do the same up and down configuration through the webbing, but for the sake of showing you what else you can do, I'm just gonna go up. And now I begin to pull a little bit tight. Now you can see these clips were left in place from the last time I used it, and they're about 12 inches away. And that's important to remember because the rain fly needs more spacing between the trees than the hammock does. And so you can finish setting up your hammock and it works fine, and you almost won't be able to set up your rain fly. This shows you kind of where your rain fly needs to end if you hook up your rain fly to the hammock suspension. And so it's a good idea to leave these in place as a guide, or remember that you need something like 12 inches on each side. Okay, so as I try and pull this taut, I hit this before the other one over there is hit. So I know I actually need the whole system to go that way a little bit, but I'm close, I'm already close. So what I'm gonna do, if you wanna come over here, Shell, is I'm gonna tie this off. Now there's a bunch of ways you can tie it off, okay? And there's really no, let's say, right answer. But I'll show you how he recommends doing it. He recommends doing a figure-8 lash. And this can be a little bit tricky to figure out in the very beginning. And so I'm gonna show it to you on the other side. But over here, I might just sleep on a Siberian hitch. And I know it stretches a little bit as I tie it. Oops. I've slept on Siberian hitches many times. It is a quick release hitch, and so if you feel more confident, you can put a stick in there and you can pull that taut on the stick so that if somebody accidentally pulls on this in the middle of the night, you don't go flying. But I sleep on Siberian hitches and have for many years. Okay, so that side, let's say, is done. Over here, I pull my Siberian hitch out and I can get back to work. Okay, now I'm not gonna worry, for this video, I'm not gonna worry too much about if it's level or not, because I'm actually not gonna sleep in this tonight. You basically want it level, although you often want your feet a little bit higher, 1 or 2 inches higher, because there's something about having your feet up, just like with a recliner chair, that feels good, and having your feet down that doesn't. So I always put the feet up. Now, if you screw that up, you can always just switch the way you're sleeping. You always sleep with your head on the left side of the hammock and your feet on the right, but you can switch, you can sleep with the zipper on your left or the zipper on your right, it doesn't matter. Okay, so now what we're gonna do, if you wanna come over here, Shell, is we're gonna, well, I'd probably come over here underneath. You need to do what he calls the figure-8. And the figure-8 can be a little bit weird to get started, but you basically go over, and then you start to make your 8, and you go over here. And if you look right here, you can see that it kind of looks like an 8 or a pretzel. And then he recommends that you do that 4 times. I think less than 4 would be fine, but he's trying to make sure nobody falls. And he says to pull this nice and taut, but it doesn't make a major difference. Okay, when you're done, you can finish it off in a bunch of ways. You can make a loop and pull it through all the way, or you can, that would be a half hitch, or you can do a slippery half hitch so that you don't have to untie it in the morning, something like that. And you can do a loop and pull that through. Those are called half hitches. You can do slippery versions or non-slippery versions. In the morning, if it's gonna be cold and your hands are gonna be freezing, it's nice to be able to just pull on something. But now the hammock is, let's say, set up. Again, I'm not gonna fiddle too much with being level and even because no one's gonna be sleeping in this tonight. We're gonna move it, but you'd wanna take time to do that. That's what's nice about the Siberian hitches if you're alone, is you can Siberian hitch each side and then walk 30 feet away and check to see if it's level. You really don't wanna lash and then walk and then have to unlash and then lash and then walk. So a quick Siberian hitch style knot is very handy. Okay, then we're gonna tie out, let's say you're sleeping in a place where you know there's no rain and you don't want the rain fly. We're almost done here and I'll just show you what the last bit looks like. So I typically don't bring tent stakes. That's another way that I save weight while backpacking. So I'll make some or break some off the ground, something like that. So I made a couple of these last night. So you want to pull this out something like here. And you want to come in close, show.
Okay.
So these are non-closing mitten hooks, which means there's always a gap. If you try and hook this on itself, it'll come out in the middle of the night, or it'll definitely come out as you get in the hammock. So you can try wrapping this, something like that. I've done that before. But the best solution I've found, and this is just kind of one of those little things you discover when you work with ropes and knots a lot, is take a loop like that and pass it through this hole. And now you have this loop. And then you can put it on here. And if it's still too slippery, what you can do is you can just fold this over like that and then put it on there. You always remember that knots are related to friction. If you need more friction, just put more loops, put more passes, put more turns, put more bends in it, and that'll be perfectly fine throughout the night. Okay, on the other side, we'll do the same thing. Now, you won't have this green one. I added that. I'll tell you why in a few minutes. Do the same thing. I'll pass this through so that I don't have to worry about this hook coming undone in the middle of the night. I'll double it up so I get extra friction. I'll throw that around. Okay, so now I'm pretty much done. If you come around here to this side, this is a zippered model, not a bottom entry model. So I changed out my poles for easy to find green ones with big loops. Now inside of your hammock over here, you'll have an O-ring and you'll have a little bungee cord attached to it. I took mine off because I didn't like it in there with me in the night when I didn't need it, but I took mine to the outside. So I leave it on the outside, and I made it green so that I never grab it instead of the tie out. And what you can do with that is you can wrap that around here like so. Or in your case, it goes from here around, and then that pulls back the mosquito netting. And that can be really nice for when you're loading or unloading or folding or whatever. It can be really nice if you just want to lounge around, those sorts of things. You have a couple mitten hooks, of course, to hang stuff. You have these mesh trays hanging from the top to hang stuff. I really like keeping my headlamp or my little pocket flashlight hanging right here so I have it in the middle of the night. And then up here in the corner, you have these O-rings. So you can hang things to these O-rings if you want. I like to shove like clothes up here and kind of jam it in the corner so that I have extra clothes in the middle of the night if I'm going to be cold. And you can sleep in either direction. So typically I sleep this way, where my left elbow is very close to this O-ring. That's what they recommend on the website. And I normally sleep with the zipper on my right. Maybe that's because I'm right-handed, I don't really know. But you can do it the exact opposite, where you sleep with your left elbow near this O-ring and the zipper's on your left, and you put your feet on the right. So both of those are options. Okay, so now let's set up the rain fly. Okay, there's several ways to set up the rain fly. The easiest way is to clip it to the hammock. Now, the rain fly is roughly shaped like a diamond, and the way that you will know which part of the rain fly is to run parallel to the hammock is because of this seam, this sewn seam. You'll notice that when you get to where the tie-outs are, there's no seam. Now, I once didn't notice that and set it up wrong, and then couldn't get it to tie out properly, and I got really mad because I realized I had made that mistake. And that's when I changed out my black cords for green. The green goes to the ground. It's also easy to see at night. It's also reflective. And so I will never make that mistake again. And if you're setting up at night and it's raining and you're frustrated and it's cold, you may miss those sorts of things. Okay, so the easiest way to hook this whole thing up is to just use this O-ring. And you clip it. These are basically sliding loops. They're built with essentially a prusik knot, where if you tug on this, it doesn't move, but then you can move it anywhere you want. So you hook that, start maybe 6 inches, 9 inches away from the end of the hammock, clip it on. He also recommends clipping this little mitten hook thing on here. I don't do that. I've never noticed that it actually adds anything meaningful. It's just one more thing to unclip in the morning. And then you clip in over here. Then you want to get tension and position correct. So obviously there's no point, you might have tension, but then the rain fly might not be covering much of the hammock here. So you just want to eyeball this and say, okay, from hook to the end, I got 12, 14 inches. What do I have over there? 8 inches. You just want to get it roughly. Okay. And then you basically just slide these, dress the knots until you have tension. Now, if you suspect, or if you know there's going to be rain, then you might want to put the rain fly down really low. That way, if the rain's coming in this way, you don't get wet. On nights like this, we really set it up just so that our trip doesn't get ruined by unforeseen rain. And so we'll hook them up like this into the trees so that we have a beautiful view. Now, depending on if you chose your tie out position properly for your hammock, this may be a time that you want to redo it, but you can just go to the same tie out. It's pretty much cut in the same way. You can go to the same tie out. And if you have tons of slack like this, it can be very annoying to tie a taut line hitch, because you got to pull this through, and you got to through again, and you can whip people while you're doing it, and then you got to pull it through again. Okay, so now you have a taut line hitch, that's fine, but now you have all this slack. So an alternative to that, the other thing is you have to undo it in the morning like this. It's not as slippery. So one alternative to that, to get rid of all the slack, is to just go up and then go back through the O-ring. And all you're really doing is taking up the slack. Okay, now you can tie a very quick taut line hitch, because you don't have a lot of slack or excess. There you go, and you don't have it all over the ground. Okay, an alternative to that, which is what I use nowadays, is the hitch that I wish I had learned instead of the taut line hitch, which is called the Ferramond hitch. And what's nice about the Ferramond hitch, and I'll show this to you, is let's say that you have your string all bundled up, and let's just say it's even longer than this. So you have it bundled up like this. What I like about the Ferramond hitch is you do not need access to that tail to tie it, okay? So you don't know how much you're gonna need, so watch, you just go down, you just start pulling this out like this, and you pull it back like this, and you can just leave that there on the ground like that, because the Ferramond hitch, and again, you can do a double wrap if that's helpful for you. The Ferramond hitch is something you'll probably want to check out on animatedknots.com. Whoops. But the Ferramond hitch does not require access to the tail, and it is a quick release knot. It takes probably about the same amount of time to tie. I just haven't tied as often. So it's a sliding tension knot, just like the taut line hitch. But what's great is first of all, I didn't need access to the tail. I can basically keep this bundled so it's not all over the place. And in the morning when I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. Okay, so that's the advantage of the Ferramond. Check it out on animatedknots.com. Learn that instead of the taut line would be my recommendation. Give me a thumbs down if you disagree. And then we come on to the other side. Now, I'm not going to tie down the other side because it's the same process. What I want to point out is that you can be very creative with this. So over here, you'll see that I tied underneath some roots. So, you know, you just clean out some dust in between the roots. You can tie right to roots. You can tie to tent stakes. I've also very often tied to big heavy rocks. So if you don't have tent stakes, or if you're in a, well, you won't be in a treeless area, otherwise you won't be in a hammock, but for sake of conversation, just really quick, you can just wrap a string around a rock, heavy rock, and you can do that. So there's a lot of options. Use your creativity. Don't always use your tent stakes. The last one I'll show you over here, I wanted to give the woman doing the filming for me a nice view. So I jumped up like this, and I pulled this down, and I wrapped it around there. And now, because we're not expecting rain, it pulls it up, gives it a great view. So you can go to branches, you can go to the ground, roots, rocks. The last thing you might need to do is, if there's nowhere to tie it off to, you might need to take a different piece of cord that you brought with you and run it between two trees and then tie off to the middle of that. Okay, let's come on back here, Shell. Okay, the second thing that you may want to do, instead of tying your rain fly to the hammock, is to do a completely independent tie. There's a couple reasons that you might want to do this. The first reason is, if you're not really expecting rain, then it's not that much fun having all of this really hunkered down. It feels tight, you can't see, and so you might want it up and out of your way. The other reason is, when it's attached to the hammock, then you're always ducking to get stuff. Whereas if it's above head, it acts like a roof, and you can maybe sit on the ground near your hammock and do your cooking, and you have a roof over your head. And so that can be quite pleasant. The last thing is, when you have these tucked down really tight, you get what they call a microclimate inside. So it may be 70 degrees and 70% humidity outside, but it might be like 80 and 80 inside, because you're doing all the exhaling, and this thing creates something like a mini microclimate. So in order to do an independent rain fly, you have to use the cords that are at the end here. I changed mine out for shorter 275 paracord because I didn't like the silky nature of what he gives you. And this is another great example of a Siberian hitch. Is a great choice here. Siberian hitches don't require a lot of rope, so you don't need to do. That's the other advantage of learning knots, is you can tie a sturdy knot with a very small amount of rope. Whereas lashing, just continuously wrapping, it works because friction is a thing, but it also takes a lot of rope, and sometimes you don't have that. And so sometimes I've literally put these things up and I've had such a small amount of rope, I had to change the knot. Okay, so in this case, I'm a little bit, I've given too much slack over there. So now I'll do another Siberian hitch here. Try not to get sap all over myself. Siberian hitches are like probably the best knot ever. I learned it from Ray Mears. If you've never heard of Ray Mears, Google him. Awesome guy. Okay, and then I gotta pull the slack back out. So now I'll pull my Siberian hitch back out. And come on over here, babe. So you can do a couple things here. You can do a taut line hitch. You can do a Fairmont hitch. You can also use this O-ring like a trucker's hitch, and you can pull tension on it that way. I've done that many times. And then you can end with a couple of half hitches. You can do slippery versions like I'm gonna do, and that'll hold just fine. So then again, this is nice. You can see how I can get into my hammock. I get a better view of the sky, and my rain fly is now more like a roof and less like a tight to the hammock rain fly. Okay. Couple other tricky things that you may run into. Come on over here and I'll show you. Okay, this is the first time that all 5 of us have slept, besides our backyard, in hammocks. And so we all wanted to be close so that if we had trouble, we could hear each other and the kids felt safe. And so we chose this collection of trees. Now, the distance from this tree to this tree is enough to suspend a hammock, but not enough to get the tarp taut. That's why they look a little dodgy. So you have a couple solutions for that. Come on in. What you can do is you can just pull the rain fly around the tent, around the tree, but then it's a little bit offset and you can't really get the tension right. Or in this case, what I did is I wrapped the rain fly going down through this V of my rope, and then I just wrapped it. And you don't get a taut pitch. It looks a little cheesy, but it's an option. It's an option for when the distance between the 2 trees that you want a hammock on is wide enough for the hammock, too narrow for the rain fly, or, and this has happened to me before, I didn't realize the trees were too narrow, and I'd already spent 15 minutes trying to get the hammock just right, and I got all my gear loaded because I didn't want to put the rain fly in until the very end, and now it's late and I'm tired and it's cold and I just want to get in, and I realize, shoot, the trees are too narrow, but I'm not really even expecting rain. And so sometimes you get stuck in this scenario What's important to remember is that you need approximately 2 additional feet in order to set up the Rainfly versus just the hammock. So try and keep that in mind. If not, you can do something like this as a latch ditch effort. It works pretty good. Doesn't look pretty, but there's no extra points for beauty. Okay, so I think we covered everything except for insulation, which I'm not going to go over. There's not a lot of tricks or hacks for the insulation. We do own the double bubble pad, and we own a couple super shelters. I think they work really good. So if you're wondering about those would be my comments. Yeah, and then maybe the last thing to say is at the end of the Rainfly, they do have these hooks and these O-rings. It's not a bad idea to hook things to them that are heavy. They'll help keep things taut and tensioned. The other thing is you have to remember that once this material gets wet, it will stretch a little bit. You'll lose some of the tautness that you had. And so you want to have adjustable knots on here so that if it starts really pouring rain, you can jump out, you can hide under here really quickly, and you can pull some extra tension. You don't want to dedicate yourself to a knot way out by the stake that's not adjustable, because the temperature and humidity and moisture will change the tautness. You may need to increase that if a storm's coming, or if the rain's coming down, or if water's getting in the hammock. And so adjustable knots are really needed in that situation. So I hope that was helpful to somebody. If not, that's okay. Give it a thumbs down. Let me know. Go check out Hennessy Hammock's website and buy a hammock from them. I'm not getting commission. They don't know I exist, but I'm just a fan. I would recommend Hennessy Hammocks to anyone and everyone who can afford them and who wants to get outdoors and wants to get away from tent camping. I think hammocks are way more comfortable than tents. They are they double as a lounge chair and as a place to hang out. If you get the height right, you can sit and you can cook with the stove outside, and they're just super comfortable. In hot weather, it sucks the heat out of your back, so you stay cooler. In cold weather, there's a bit of a disadvantage, but there are some ways to compensate for that. The one thing you lose is that family atmosphere, like all 5 of you in the tent playing games. You definitely lose that. And obviously they're useless above the tree line. But other than that, I think that they are the lighter, more comfortable, more versatile, more fun option. And I hope this video helped you discover some of that. So that's it for today. Take care, folks. Thank you.